Hey there, it's Tim again, of course. Um, so getting into part 12 of On the River Gran among the Quadi. Here we go. The speed with, oh, blah. The speed with which all of them vanish, the objects in the world, and the memory of them in time, and the real nature of the things our senses experience, especially those that entice us with pleasure, or frighten us with pain, or are loudly trumpeted by pride. To understand those things, how stupid, contemptible, grimy, decaying, and dead they are, that is what our intellectual prowess or powers are for. And to understand what those people really amount to, whose opinions and voices constitute fame, and what dying is, and that if you look at it in the abstract and break down your imaginary ideas of it by logical analysis, you realize that it's nothing but a process of nature, which only children can be afraid of, and not only a process of nature, but a necessary one, and how man grasps God, in what part of himself he does so, and how that part is conditioned when he does. That's the end of it. So right off the top of my head, I'm thinking he's just, I think, talking about the fleeting nature of the world, the things that concern people day to day. Nothing is ever permanent. Some things can certainly last longer than a human lifespan, but the aspects of our day-to-day lives and our goals and ambitions, they are ultimately all going to be gone. And whether that's within our lifetime or not, but when we're gone, we don't get to experience those things anymore. And so they're at the very least gone to us. I think that's what he's getting at. But let's break it down here. So the speed with which all of them vanish, the objects in the world and the memory of them in time, and the real nature of the things our senses experience, especially those that entice us with pleasure or frighten us with pain, are loudly trumpeted by pride. So he's really just rounding it all out, just everything. And I think he's using speed here, not in the sense that, certainly there's things that, you're having a party one night, you're so happy, things are going great, and then it's bedtime, and that's over. He's talking about that, but I think more so he's getting to just the fact that after several generations, things get lost to time. Like I don't know the name of my great grandparents, or like what they did for work, the people that they knew and loved. I mean, they would have known and loved my grandparents, but I couldn't tell you a thing about them really. And yeah, I think that's what he's getting at, though, is that in like the 100, 200 years and beyond that, just how cities transform, towns transform, things are unrecognizable to us. I'm not old enough yet to fully recognize this, but you hear it often with people who are 60, 70, 80, and the hometowns they grew up in, they can hardly recognize them anymore. They're totally different. They either grew exceptionally or shrunk considerably. And there's a few examples where not much really happened, but that's what he's getting at here, though, I think. Just pleasure, frightening experience, prideful achievements. They all eventually go by the wayside one day. To understand those things, how stupid, contemptible, grimy, decaying, and dead they are, that is what our intellectual powers are for. And to understand what those people really amount to, and whose opinions and voices constitute fame. So again, I think here he's talking about the human experience of, just ask the natural human curiosity to ask why, to be inquisitive. Why is that thing happen? And normally our brains are tilted towards the negative. We don't normally ask why. Why are we having such a good time right now? Normally it's, why do I have to clean the toilet again? Or why did that atrocity have to happen? Not so much, why did that wedding have to happen, or that celebration? Then to understand what those people really amount to, whose opinions and voices constitute fame. So I think here he's kind of looking at, just because someone's famous, should you take their word as gospel? Let me look at it again. What do they really amount to? Like, they might be famous, and they might have their heyday, and that might last a considerable portion of their life, but their life will be over at some point, and then the next crop of famous people will arise from that, or follow closely behind them, take their place. And what dying is. And so he's saying, like, our mind is, comprehending what dying is. And that if you look at it in the abstract and break down your imaginary ideas of it by logical analysis, you realize that it's nothing but a process of nature which only children can be afraid of. And not only a process of nature, but a necessary one. This is something that I'm personally, it's been on my mind lately, he's calling me a child here because I'm still afraid of death. I don't want to die. I have a lot to look forward to in my life, and I want to experience that. But I think what he's really getting at here, though, is that you're either alive or you're dead. And this is coming from somebody else, but I think this is what he's getting at here. You're either alive in you, or you're dead, and we don't know yet what that experience is like. Nobody knows the answer to that. But when you come along to death, it's going to be an experience, and if you are dead, then you're not alive, and if you're not alive, you can't experience death itself, I suppose. You can experience the moment up until then while you're still alive, but on the other side, we don't know what's there. And in his other passages and the ones prior to this, he has a strong belief that God, nature, fate, whatever you want to call it, will have equipped us with the necessary tools, whether they're mental tools, emotional tools, to deal with that on the other side. And so to be afraid of that, there's just no logical reason. And my own personal thoughts on this are, well, yes, I would certainly be upset at all the things I didn't experience. I'd be more so upset at the fact that if I left this earth earlier than I intended, I'd be upset with just the sadness that my loved ones would feel in my absence. Not so much the death itself. I certainly hope it's not terribly painful or scary. That doesn't sound very fun. But I can resonate with his words in prior ones where he's talking about how whatever we are, whatever I am, I think I can try my best to handle what's on the other side of that if I have any wherewithal about me. But it'd be more so leaving friends and family in this world is where I would it's more so sadness than fear, if anything, but it's certainly a sprinkling of fear still. And then it's not only a process of nature, but a necessary one. So without that renewal and without the death of old things ossify and they get stale. It takes new life, new ideas, new ways of doing things, with certainly learnings from the past, of course. But it takes that to sometimes move society and civilization and the human experience forward. And it's a totally natural part of the world, that everything has its time and place. And if everybody on this earth stayed alive indefinitely, then there probably wouldn't end up being a lot of change for the new generations, or the new generations would be faced with trying to change an ever-growing mass of people who are aging beyond them. With ideas that have existed for a very, very long time, and the younger generation might not necessarily agree with that, or be comfortable with that. And so in that sense, change isn't always good. Neither is constant change. But nature has a way of finding a balance between keeping some of the old while encouraging some of the new. And that's what he's getting at here. Without making space for new, you get ossification, staleness. You can think of like a forest, an old growth forest. Sometimes they can become, if a fire doesn't sweep through there and decimate it, sometimes it can become so full of choked up, the canopy's so choked up, there's so little sunlight that the whole bottom floor, no new plants can grow, and then animals can't really thrive there. And it just kind of becomes this, it's surrounded by nature, but it's this almost rotting, stale just place that's not really flourishing. Now on the other hand though, a fire rips through and destroys everything, and it's ripping hot, and it kills all the trees. That's not very good either. There's so much, it's pretty cool science about how some of these mother trees, these really old trees in the forest, and really big ones, their root systems, just everything connects to one another for kilometers and kilometers, and they can send nutrients to each other, and like beneficial bacteria and fungi. And so when a fire rips through, hopefully it's not so hot that it kills every single tree, because then it's going to be quite a while till some of those new things start to poke up out of the ground again. But if you have some of the old trees that were there to support some of the younger ones coming up, that forest can regenerate much more rapidly, and be healthier overall. That new growth provides food for new animals to move in and migrate to that area. And so that's just a little microcosm of an example of why death and the passing of certain people, of ideas, it's not always a bad thing. It's a part of nature. And then his last sentence here, and how man grasps God, with what part of himself he does so, and how that part is conditioned when he does. Trying to think what he's thinking here. How man grasps God, with what part of himself he does so. How that part is conditioned when he does. In the broader context of it, of the whole passage here, I think he's getting at when you put your faith in God or nature or the process of life, when you put some things up to fate and chance and accept the natural order of the world, that part's conditioned. I think that's what he's getting at for the first part, but for that part is conditioned when he does. I imagine I imagine he's saying conditioned to realize that there's nothing to be afraid of, conditioned to accept that certain amount of unpredictability caused by fate or God's will and providence. Yeah, conditioned. How that part is conditioned when he does. Yeah, I think that's what he's really getting at. Is just, yeah, what I've just said there. But it's interesting though, because he's saying like that part. Because normally he speaks in ways where, you know, kind of your whole. I wouldn't expect him to say something that like only part of you is accepting of this type of fate, leaving other parts to be fearful, perhaps. Maybe he is though, and it's kind of the struggle of life, or the part of life to always be kind of reining those fears in with a part of you that is accepting. And I think that sounds pretty good. Yeah, we'll leave it there. You let me know in the comments what you think he means by that sentence or the whole passage. Thank you.